Hello，你好，Welcome back，欢迎回来to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger on July 13, 2022. I'm working on my DJ voice in case you guys haven't noticed. Anyway, enough messing around. Today we're going to talk about a little trivia, but it's actually quite an interesting little factum about what constitutes a proper meal for Chinese people. I mean, yeah, nowadays you, of course, if you just want to have hamburgers and fries, and you call that a meal, or if you just want to order pizza, you can call that a meal. But as I mentioned before, Chinese culture has been around for a long time, and Chinese people have a lot of traditions and a lot of ceremonies that are still observed today by many people. And if you have hang around Chinese people long enough, you will have noticed that Chinese people put a lot of stock into first money, second food. And when it comes to food, Chinese people are quite particular about what they think of as proper food, proper meal. How many dishes, where the knife, they don't put knife on the table, but where how to hold your chopstick, how not to hold your chopstick. I'll give you a little example, just to uh, act as a little starter appetizer, since we are talking about meal and food. Um, if you ever eat with Chinese people at a Chinese family's table or in Chinese restaurant, do not stick your chopstick right on top of your rice. Okay, if you want to put your chopstick down, you either put it down on the table or you put it down on top of your rice bowl, but do not jab it into the rice and leave it standing like that. That is like a huge taboo. Now, if you are not Chinese yourself, a lot of time Chinese people will just tell you, hey, can you move your chopsticks? They'll be polite about it because they'll make allowances because you don't know. But a Chinese person doing this most likely will get yelled at, and people will think that what's the matter? You grew up in a barn. Your parents never taught you anything. Why is that? Why is it so taboo to stick your chopstick on top of the bowl of rice like that? Because that's what you do when you're giving food, when you're leaving food for the deceased, for the spirit. When you are uh, trying to appease your ancestors, you leave them food and fruit and flour and rice. And usually, what you do with the rice is you stick sticks of incense on top of the rice. Like you stick the incense sticks right into the rice and let them stand like that. So when you stick your chopstick on top of the rice, it's kind of spooky and creepy, and it's like you're saying there's a dead person at the table. So Chinese people are pretty big on that. That's just one of the hundreds of taboos that Chinese people have around eating and stuff like that. We'll gradually get a lot of these out uh, to you guys. But today, let's talk about what actually constitutes as a proper meal to a Chinese person, to a Chinese family. And the solution, the formula is very simple. Actually, it's not complicated. 四菜一汤，四菜一汤，四 that means four, number four. 一二三四 one two three four. 四 number four. 菜 we talked about this word before. Very interesting when it comes to food. 菜 actually means veggies or vegetables, but in Chinese language, in Mandarin, Chai, Chai, actually, uh, it's spelled Chai, but it's pronounced more like Tsai, Chai. Okay, uh, it's symbolizes dishes, uh, food items. So when when you hear people tell you, hey, 多吃菜,they're telling you don't be shy, eat more. They're not telling you just to eat veggies, right? 多 DWO means more. 吃 CHE eat. 菜 in this case means dishes. 多吃菜. You'll hear this on the Chinese dinner table a lot. People will say 多吃点 or 多吃菜 means eat more. It's okay. Or people will say when they pass food to you, they'll say 吃菜 means hey, eat this. So 菜 in this case means dishes. 四菜 four dishes. 一 number one, 一二三四 one two three four. 一 that's number one. Tang Tong, tang means soup. In Mandarin, you do not eat soup. You always drink soup. So to have soup, you say he tang, Hertong. Hertong means to have your soup, to eat your soup. But if you have seen Chinese soup, you'll notice that it's really liquidy. So Chinese people, we don't eat our soup, we drink our soup. So he tang means to have some soup. So proper meal to a Chinese person in the proper Chinese on the proper Chinese table is 四菜一汤, four dishes, one soup. Keep in mind, these four dishes do not include rice or noodle. Okay, so if you have uh, chow mein noodle or just regular plain rice or fried rice, sorry about that, I have to do that. Um, if you have rice or noodle or bread of any kind, those do not count. Those count as fillers. So those do not count into the four dishes. You need to have four dishes in addition to the filler food, such as rice or noodle or bread or rolls or flatbread or whatever you're eating the dishes with. So 四菜一汤, it's a golden standard for a proper Chinese meal. If you ever go to a Chinese family to eat there, you'll notice that Chinese people very, very rarely do things like casseroles or just a beef stew or something like that. Most Chinese families are still very big on if it's just us eating at home, then yeah, okay, we might have only one or two dishes. But if it's a guest coming to eat, then it's go back to the old golden standard of 四菜一汤. You have to get four dishes. Even if you don't feel like cooking four dishes, you still have to go out and buy the ones that you don't want to cook. So, for example, my own mother, because my mom wasn't a cook, she hated cooking and she wasn't very good at it. So, when guest would come over, and if she had to be the one that uh, served food, she would make sure that she had the soup. She knew how to make that. She actually made pretty good soup. She would make sure to have the rice, and then she would cook one vegetarian dish because she was better at cooking vegetable. And then she would drive to the nearest barbecue shop or Chinese restaurant and buy three additional meat or seafood dishes to make the four dishes. So some people might say, well, okay, so you make it sound like this is so particular, so strict. Who says it has to be that way? Where is the law? Well, you may be surprised because this actually was legalized. In 1960, the chairman of China himself made it into the law and etiquette of the Chinese people. So this was actually written down uh, put into actual effect by the chairman of China himself in the 1960s, that said 4 dishes, 1 soup, 4菜1汤 is the proper meal for Chinese people and will be the proper meal for national feast. So this was made it so that even when they were entertaining foreign uh, dignitaries and guests. There's no confusion. There's no hundreds of dishes and wasteful food going to waste, and none of that. Right? Even when we are entertaining presidents or dignitaries from other countries, you still go by the 四菜一汤 format. Now, some people may say, well, that seems kind of stingy, like let's say the president of the United States come to Taiwan or China, you only give them 4 dishes at the national feast when you treat them. That doesn't seem right. Well, they actually left a little loophole in that because as long as you stick to the 4-1 ratio, you can increase it however much you want. So you can do 8 dishes, 2 soup. You can do 12 dishes, 3 soup. But you have to stick to that 4-1 ratio on the national feast. That is the guideline that they have to go by. That said, the chairman of China did not invent the 四菜一汤, the 4 dish, 1 soup tradition. Now, this tradition has been around way longer than modern Chinese, than democracy or communism. The person that actually invented this tradition was Zhu Yuanzhang, the first emperor, Emperor Zhu of the Yuan dynasty, back in about 600 years ago, in I believe 1366, when Emperor Zhu took power and started his own dynasty, the Yuan dynasty, the Ming dynasty. My bad, the Ming dynasty, that came after Yuan dynasty. So 1366, the Ming dynasty, Emperor Zhu, little blooper there. Anyway, so Emperor Zhu, after he took power, because Emperor Zhu grew up as a very poor person. He grew up as a farmer and beggar. He was panhandling for a while. It's quite interesting. I mean, the whole backstory of how a simple peasant that have to beg for food eventually became one of the greatest, most memorable emperors in Chinese history, and throughout the Mongolian people, drove the Mongolian people out of China, and reclaimed our own culture and our own legacy, our own land. That is a whole different story. Actually, I will make quite a few stories for several different episodes. But yeah, so Emperor Zhu, after he took power, he was disgusted by how much corruption was going on in among the nobles and the imperials and the ministers and the government workers. Yeah, you thought government workers today are corrupt. Government workers back then were corrupt. Just saying. Anyways, because there was so much turmoil going on, wars, and people were suffering, and Mongolian people just got kicked out of China, and now we have civilians that were trying to recover from the rule of the Mongolian people, or Mongols, let's put a proper term. Uh, and yet, these emperors' ministers, these uh, officials, imperial magistrate, they were still having gigantic feast every day, 3 meals a day, and some of them have so much food that they would uh, have hundreds of dishes uh, going, and the kitchen would be cooking all day long, and there's food going to waste constantly, and people were always drunk, and there's a lot of debauchery, and a lot of money just being squandered away for these ministers and magistrates and generals to have their lavish lifestyle. Like I said, Emperor Zhu started out as a really poor peasant. So when he became emperor, he was furious. He was mad. He was like, wow, I didn't realize that my own people were so corrupt, were so wasteful. What the heck? Here we were, I thought we were basically trying to fight off the Mongols and reclaim China. And here these guys are partying every day. What the hell? So Emperor Zhu decided to put a stop to it. And so one day, when he had one of the imperial meetings, when all his top tier generals and ministers came to report uh, things to him, Emperor Zhu said to them, I want you guys to stay afterward. I have a meal prepared for you guys, and this is a proper meal, even for an emperor. And these people were excited. Well, we get to eat with the emperor. There's got to be some really good stuff. Like, it got to be like the lobsters and crab and cheeseburgers and pizza. I don't bloody know what they like to eat back then. I'm just making it up as I go along, okay? So anyway, I don't know, maybe they have prime rib. Let's go with prime rib. So they thought we're gonna have prime rib, we are gonna have a buffet. And then when the meal was served, there were four dishes. Dish number one, boiled carrot. Dish number two, stir-fried green onion. Dish number three, stir-fried cabbage. Dish number four, boiled uh, spinach. No meat whatsoever. Yes, the original four dishes, one soup was all vegetarian. No meat whatsoever. And when the soup came up, it was a clear broth with pieces of green onion and tofu in it. Nothing else. The generals and ministers and magistrates, they looked at each other like, what the heck? This is not even fitting for feeding pigs. I wouldn't even give this to my dog. Why would we stay here and eat this? Why would the emperor play a joke like this? And Emperor Zhu, seeing how none of them were interested in eating, he got himself a bowl of this clear broth and tofu and green onion, and he said to them, he said, I eat these things like this every day because I was poor. I couldn't even get any of this back then. I would be lucky if I could get a bowl of rice. So I eat this soup. You guys can see there's two colors in the soup. The soup is clear, and then you have the green onion in Mandarin. The green color means qin. Qin. You have the qin color, and then you have the white color of the tofu. White color in Mandarin means bai. So this soup remind me, and it should remind all of you that we should live a qin bai lifestyle. And for those of you that don't know your Mandarin very well, qin bai in Mandarin means just, means uh, pure means non not corrupted means honest, honorable. 清白 is like one of the like purity. It's a championship, like noble. It's a little phrase that uh, encompasses all those virtues. So this soup, this tofu and green onion soup that none of you want to have because you guys are all corrupt. You should drink more of this, and you will be more 清白, you'll be more noble and honorable. That's what the emperor said to them. And right away, the generals and ministers and magistrates, they still didn't want the food. But now that the soup is directly linked to their honor and their nobility, uh, they they dug into the meal with gusto. Everyone tried to outdo the next person. Everyone tried to pretend that was the best food they ever had. After they went home, they told the chef to throw away all the lavish food, give it to the peasant. From now on, we are going to eat food that means nobility and honor and 清白 and justice and all that stuff, because that's what the emperor said. And I can't let the emperor think that I am the corrupt person. I have to show the emperor that I'm willing to eat the same thing that he eats. Otherwise, who knows when he's going to chop my head off. Which, by the way, Emperor Zhu was a bit of a tyrant because he was famous for chopping off heads. He was famous for killing anybody who displeased him. So these people quickly converted over to the four vegetarian dishes and very bland tofu soup for good reason. Because if they didn't, it's very likely that the emperor would next time would just skip over being subtle and start chopping off heads. So there you have it. Ming Dynasty, almost over 600 years ago. This tradition got started by the Emperor of China, and it's still the golden standard in Chinese household today for a proper Chinese meal. 四菜一汤, four dishes, one soup.